Good morning, everyone. Hopefully our speakers are nearly ready. I'm Paula Taylor. I'm the Global Development Director for D&AD. My key role is to accelerate the growth and scale of D&AD Impact. D&AD Impact is a platform for celebrating brave, creative and innovative ideas that have an impact in a positive way in the world. So I'd like to invite our speakers today to the stage. Joanna Catalano, CEO of iProspect. Arnaud Mourot, Global VP Strategic Corporation Alliances, Ashoka Europe. And Stuart, founder, Feedback Global and Toast Ale.
So well.
So we'll kick off with you, Joanna. Last year you spoke to technology and advertising leaders Google, Facebook and Microsoft around your respective efforts to leverage tech for good and to enact meaningful societal change. You've furthered your commitment by launching the Digital Society Index, a study which ranks countries in terms of how well they are building a digital economy that works for all in society. The Digital Society Index analyses the 10 economies across 3 key dimensions: dynamism, inclusion and trust. So our question to you, Joanna, what are the key findings of the Digital Society Index, and is there an opportunity for us to collectively work together to bridge the gap, and why is this important for iProspect?
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I think let's just talk a little bit about the Digital Society Index, and thanks for kind of the warm-up for it. We did look at a number of dimensions. First, it was a basket of economies, so 10 economies, 10 nations. They're primarily, I would say, first-world economies, so that's one factor that needs to be considered. And I think they were we selected them based on 2 key indexes. One is a World Economic Forum index called the Networked Readiness Index, and the second is one that was run by the Fletcher School at Tufts in the United States, which is the Digital Evolution Index. And so that's how we decided. We looked at economies that were considered advanced digital economies. So that's how we decided which economies to look at. And we were really looking to create a benchmark. So this isn't a one-off study that will be done. We'll actually be running it repeatedly. And we wanted to provide both business leaders as well as policymakers, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, at length, this intersection of business and government and the role it has to play. But we wanted to really provide them with an understanding of how the digital society is impacting people, the people that live in these countries. So that's a little bit of background on it. Now, in terms of the findings, as you mentioned, it looked at 3 dimensions: dynamism, inclusion, and trust. When we think about inclusion and trust, those 2 roll up to what we're calling digital engagement. And in 2018, globally, digital engagement sits at 45%. It relates to how positively people feel about the digital economy in terms of its ability to create jobs and to solve societal challenges. When we look at dynamism, this is actually the measure of the role the digital society can play in terms of driving economic growth. So they're 2, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can have one without the other. I think when we think about this, we really feel there needs to be both. Both of these need to be happening at the same time. The gains must go beyond industry. To talk again about 3 of the maybe more challenging statistics, 50% of those surveyed actually feel the pace of change is too fast. 43% feel that technology has made society more unequal. And 55% feel there's not enough that's being done to ensure that digital benefits everyone living in these. So why are we here today, and why do we have the likes of Ashoka and Tristram, who has both Feedback Global and Toast Ale, and he can speak about those? Why are we here, and why are we having these conversations? Ashoka and the work that Tristram's been doing, these are the individuals that really have the ability to be partners in terms of focusing much more on these dimensions of inclusion and trust. Really making sure that we are looking at building a digital society that is inclusive for all. Why this is important to iProspect. So, it's been a journey that we've been on. We started a couple of years ago when we launched our research in Southeast Asia on the role that technology was playing in emerging economies. It led us to launch the Female Foundry. And we really wanted to have a conversation that was more global. And I think broader in terms of how we think about it. And the Digital Society Index became a perfect anchor point for that. Our industry, technology, media, advertising, we really have the ability to be one of the world's most powerful influencers, and I don't necessarily think we're always using that to the extent that we can in order to drive change for good. The World Economic Forum estimated that the digital economy can deliver 100 trillion in economic value for business and society by 2025, but it's really up to us to decide how that happens. So that's a number, but really, it's up to us to decide whether or not there are more positive or negative benefits. And for iProspect, we know because we work with clients, we see that businesses today, because of this VUCA analogy, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, there's a lot more fear. Businesses are afraid, people are afraid, businesses are afraid, and what happens is, and we heard this yesterday, we had a panel where we talked about short-term versus long-term and the role of each in innovation. But businesses are tending to make shorter-term decisions, shorter-term focused decisions, without thinking about the broader implications for society. So it's really our job to, I think, look at this. And again, for iProspect, it's about trust. Our anchor is trust. Trust on three levels. The first is trust with our clients. Again, in the advertising industry, I would say trust is not in an all-time high. We are a client service business. We need to make sure that we really have partnerships grounded in trust with our clients. The second is the end consumer. Again, we work with some of the world's most influential brands, and they have an ability to build trust with an end consumer. And again, consumer trust and consumer sentiment is not at an all-time high. And the third, and equally important, is our employees. We have a majority millennial workforce. We know that purpose-led organizations are absolutely critical to retaining talent, and we need to make sure that we build relationships of trust with our employees. So that's why this partnerships are important to us.
So before we move on to the next question, I'd just like to ask you both, Tristan and Arnaud, do you have anything to add to Joanna's statements regarding trust, collectively working together?
I have a really burning question, actually, Joanna, about trust. I can't remember the figure, but your study was really interesting to me on one particular point, which was the level of trust people had in the existing digital economy institutions. The first thing that struck me about it was I wanted it to be much, much lower. I wanted people to distrust much more than they apparently did. And so my first question was that study done before or after the recent Facebook expose, Cambridge Analytica, Trump tie-in?
Yeah, so it was released early this year, very early this year, so yes.
Okay, great. So we have hope that the figure is a good deal higher now than it was then.
People are less trusting.
Less trusting, right. And so I guess there are two ways of dealing with this trust. One, improve the institutions so as to make them more trustworthy, and that inevitably, I'm sure, will happen, some kind of incremental reform. You'll ask for a mile and they might give an inch. The other strategy, and one that I'm certainly interested in, is how do you actually deepen that distrust and really enhance it, help it to grow and flourish, in order to create the demand and the space and the realization that actually what one needs now that these platforms are building AI capabilities generated by the big data from our user use, and put those powers, those godlike powers that are currently held in the hands of a very small number of people, into institutions that actually can be trusted because they are institutionally structured in such a way as to be inviolable rather than totally open to exploitation.
Well, I think this goes to you, my friend, because I think this is the work that you're working on.
I'll simplify it. What are the pressure points in trust that you think people will respond to? What are the things that are currently wrong with the system that people might have a capability to understand and really recognize that this is not a trustworthy system?
I mean, look, I think Cambridge Analytica did a lot of that. I think what's happening with GDPR, and we'll see more. We spoke about this yesterday. Finally the US is waking up. I live in Asia Pacific. I would say I hope it hits Asia Pacific because we are probably the most lenient. I'm not going to get into a review of history today, but please feel free to go back and look at what's happened in some of the very large Asian economies, India, China. We can review those. So I think that this revolution, we are on the doorstep of this revolution. How we go about pushing it, well, I think you have a few ideas, but I think it's also on a very it's interesting because there's kind of a scale component to it, and there's also an individual component to it. Because it is, we were talking earlier, and I think it's very much an individual choice. At what point is that tipping point where you say, I choose not to participate? And I think the other factor, which is my hope, is the youth. I really, really believe that sort of this generation right now that sits between the ages of 5, because they're all on technology from the age of 5, through sort of teens and kind of university age adults, these individuals really have the capacity to say no and change the world. I believe that, and I think we will see seismic shift.
And maybe to add to that, I think that what is really missing, because I think the digital revolution has been just about talking about tools, What the word I'm missing here is purpose, Why is that? Why are we developing new apps, new tools, new information systems, etc., if we don't have the very core purpose of that? And I think that this is what people are missing. You cannot move people just with tools. At some point that works on the short term. But if you really want to have and to give and to have them move in one or the other direction, you need to be able to share with them, maybe a hope or a big purpose. And I think that this is what, to me, the digital revolution is missing. And I think this is why also more and more people are basically coming back to totally or try to disappear from this space, because they want to reconnect with real values, with real purpose. And I think that this is something that not just tech companies, but companies in general have to come back to, I think that the raison d'être is something which is, disappearing, and we need to change that.
Arnaud, how important do you think it is for the young consumer in terms of their requiring brands to be more purposeful at the heart of their business model, as opposed to just doing a creative campaign that's a nod to something for good? And also, my other question is, what about how important it is for change makers to have a seat around the table in big business?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because in France recently you had a survey that was showing that basically, the companies who are basically the most trustful at the moment are those who are, really able to bring purpose to their core business, and to make it understandable for their clients. And I think that, again, this comes back to this notion of purpose. Why are those companies existing? When they are able to really articulate and genuinely articulate, not just nice advertisements, but genuinely articulate why what they want to bring to society, then I think that there is kind of a virtuous effect that many companies should follow up. So I think that there is a huge opportunity for basically the tech world and companies going through the digital economy to think in terms of what is the other side of this very same coin. This very same revolution, which is on the one hand digital, but has to be social on the other side. And I think that companies who will really understand that and will really actually try to accompany their digital revolution with a social revolution in terms of, the meaning that you give to your employees, the meaning that you give to your products. I think that your beer means something. It's not just a beer, I think that this is what will make a difference in the future. I think this is what clients, employees, suppliers, etc., will eventually look for.
Yeah. Are these the key characteristics of change-making organisations, what you've just articulated?
I think that's an interesting question. But for us, at least at Ashoka, a change-making organisation is basically an organisation that has really positioned at the core of its mission and its business to tackle a major social issue, and which is, I would say, consistent with that in terms of its governance, in terms of its way of working, etc. So it's not just automatically liberated type of companies, but these are companies who basically know exactly what their role in society is, and will actually be consistent in organizing themselves, in talking to their clients, and in engaging their employees, etc. We actually believe that unfortunately, the world is going very fast. The divide is also going faster, and between the poorest and the richest, and that business has a huge responsibility and I would say an opportunity to play here, because when you look at the billions of people who don't have access to either health or education or access to clean water, etc., etc., there is no way that with all due respect, social entrepreneurs only or NGOs only or government even less will solve that. So business has a huge role to play, but again, They will only do it if they understand it and not just see the short-term business value. So we believe that we need to encourage more and more businesses to become, change maker organizations. That's going to be a huge revolution. But again, I think that there is a business case there for them if they do it right.
So I want to provoke a little bit here, if I may. Like, you talk about purpose-led organizations, and we're talking about tech, right? And I'm sorry, but when I think about purpose-led organizations, I think technology companies, they sort of, they led the charge in this. Right. I mean, I spent many years at Google, and I think about Google's mission when I started there, which was to, organize the world's information and make it universally accessible. That's where Google started. It was absolutely purpose-led, and everything kind of surrounded that. And you think about Apple, and I mean, to a certain extent, you can say Facebook, whether or not you think that's a purpose that resonates with you is a different question for debate. But that was kind of at the heart of tech. Airbnb, right, is another example. So, I mean, at what point, Arnaud, do you feel that these businesses lose it? What enables an organization to keep it versus, I think today, if you look at Google, how much does that actually resonate with the average employee that's in that organization? I'm not sure, right? I wouldn't say it strongly resonates because it's expanded and multiplied across many, many different business dimensions.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question. I think that, to me, there are probably various, occasions where a business that was maybe, created to be with a real purpose to really change the world, and I think that the examples that you laid out are really good, can actually maybe progressively and divert from their first trajectory. And I think it starts probably at some point with the moment you get investors on board. If you don't have investors who are really aligned with what you want to achieve, then it has to do with your business model, etc. I think it's quite interesting that you took the example of Airbnb, because we have an Ashoka fellow who was the founder of Couchsurfing. Couchsurfing was invented before Airbnb, 4 years before, but the spirit was totally different, And maybe Couchsurfing could have become kind of an Airbnb type of model, but I think that the founder decided that, at some point he would not, welcome certain type of investors, probably the big investors that would have helped go to the next level, but that was his choice, Same on mobile banking, same on many, many things, Actually, what strikes me is that from a digital perspective, we see that a lot of the big innovations that we're talking about today, Airbnb and other stuff, were basically created many years before by social activists or social entrepreneurs. And I think that it's quite interesting, again, to learn back from, what happened that changed at some point their trajectory. I'm not saying that business is bad. I'm just saying that it's just a matter of values at the very beginning, that they might share, the same willingness to change the world, but they take different trajectory. And that's okay, I think that then this is up to the consumers, etc., to make their decisions whether they want to use Google or whether they want to go to Firefox, and the Mozilla Foundation. That's their choice. But we need to give them their choice, and this is maybe what is missing today. I think there is a discrepancy between, let's say the huge and the giants, and those who are trying to bring alternative solutions, but who are super tiny.
I have just a small follow-up question. I mean, that's opens up a whole load of things, but I want to come back to Arnaud. I think he might be the only person in this space who actually has a leg to stand on in this debate. He doesn't have a Facebook profile or a Twitter account. Can anyone else claim to be so pure in here? I definitely can't. Can you just tell us, why, how?
That's an interesting question. Now, I think that,
If we're not invading your privacy too much.
No. No, but I think it has to do with that. At some point, I really wanted to make sure that, I would create a kind of a Chinese wall between my personal and professional lives, and because I was probably not fully convinced about, the security aspect, the data protection aspect, etc., that I never decided to go there. I just have a LinkedIn profile. And for me, and I'm not leveraging, as maybe I should. And this is, my colleagues sometimes tell me, but you should post more, you should do that, you should. this is not part of that. I think that there are other ways to connect. I do hope that we can keep connecting, not just through the tech. And I'm trying to also to raise my kids in that direction, which is quite tough, I have to say. But come back to your point. This is a matter of education. Again, as long as we consider that there are only tools, beyond the security and privacy aspects. How do we help people understand that there are tools, and the tool is just a mean to an end? So what is the end goal? I think that is what we are missing here. I think that a lot of kids are just playing for the sake of playing, and they get addicted. But I really trust that we can help them understand why this type of tools can be super useful. But I haven't seen that yet, so I'm still waiting for the social entrepreneurs who will do that.
For anyone who's watching online who's in any doubt about whether Arnaud exists, they'll look up Google. He's not there. Maybe he doesn't exist. He does. I can't. He has physical existence.
Okay, so Tristan, I have a question for you, and I think we're going to show a little video as well. But you've spent many years driving initiatives and awareness around food waste. So I have a couple of questions for you, but I think we'll just go to the video. Great. So, Tristan, my question is, can you tell us about your journey? Because we'd love to hear about your journey and work around sustainability and how that has evolved alongside the digital economy. But also, keeping in mind our conversation just now, in terms of connectivity, in terms of scaling to a global audience, in terms of working on the ground with actually real people, how does it all fit together?
Thank you. Kind of my brain's going in two directions. What I've done so far and how this intersects with the discussion we've just had, but then what goes in the future. Start back there. So that event was Feeding the 5,000. I'd been campaigning on food waste for several years, eating food out of supermarket bins, showing the media how much perfectly good food was being wasted on the very same street that homeless charities were not able to feed hungry people, kicking off a really big debate to start with in the UK, but then increasingly internationalized. And there was no kind of organization behind that. I was just kind of blowing the lid on the scandal of food waste. I then published a book in 2009, which was a global survey of food waste, its causes, some pretty data-rich and densely argued text in there for a general audience. And that was also very successful at kicking off kind of high-level debate, lots and lots of conventional media coverage. But I wanted to appeal to the millions of people that were not necessarily going to engage in a cerebral way with this problem. And I thought the best way of doing that was to engage their stomachs by feeding several thousand people, all with food that otherwise would have been wasted, invite all the organizations that were tackling this problem to be part of a coalition to launch a national movement. Now, I remember when we were organizing this, in 2009, I didn't have a mobile phone. I didn't have a Facebook account. I didn't even know what these things were. Somebody said, oh, yeah, you should do this on Facebook, invite people to your event. So we did that, and it was so exciting. Within days, boom, it just spread virally. We had several thousand people signed up literally within 48 hours to come to the event. And then on the day of the event, I still didn't know whether these people online or the people that had heard us on the radio or television were actually going to show up in their physical kind of stomach-mouth presence. And it wasn't until half an hour through I was doing so many media interviews, that I looked over the balcony of Trafalgar Square, and it was snowing, but there was this huge queue of people all around Trafalgar Square. And it was the fact that we had driven online cerebral traffic into offline participation, created a spectacular that then got beamed around the world, sparked a movement first in the UK and then internationally. We've now done Feeding the 5,000s in around 50 cities around the world, Disco Soups, which was a movement that started here in France, in literally hundreds and hundreds of cities all around the world. Indeed, we did a Feeding the 5,000 here, watching this video, during the film festival. We got invited by the director of the film festival and the mayor to come and do Feeding the 5,000 right in the mouth of the beast. And it was great fun. So that was kind of the activism, and we kicked off grassroots movements, engaged all those big corporations in the policies that we were trying to drive forwards, the incremental change, getting the supermarkets to agree to donate their food rather than throw it away, and stock ugly fruit and vegetables rather than expecting everything to be perfect. And that has just proliferated. And, you know, here in France, leaders on the legislative front, I worked with the minister, Guillaume Garot, on the legislation that became this very famous, badly reported national law about donating food from supermarkets rather than destroying it. So we've created change, both at behaviour change. There's been a 25% reduction in household food waste in the UK, so real difference in people's culture and behaviour. Corporate change, you literally cannot be a big food corporation now without having a food waste policy. This was not so when we started the campaign. And most national governments and all the big international institutions are now engaged in the issue of food waste. Indeed, McKinsey, Paul Hawken with his Drawdown project have identified food waste as one of the top 3 opportunities for saving the planet, essentially. It's the easiest, biggest problem to solve. At the same time, it offers a critique to the whole productionist system that is exploiting planet Earth, destroying habitats, turning it into food that makes people obese, and leaving 1 billion people hungry. Food waste is a way of saying the efficiency that the industrial food system claims is their raison d'etre is bullshit. And, we have proof in every supermarket bin and in every field around the world. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And digital media, strategies, Facebook, Twitter, all of that stuff, they have been an integral and necessary part of everything that we've done. Of course, every time we do a Feeding the 5,000, we whack up a Facebook event, we tweet like mad, and do all of the things that everyone else does. And increasingly, as awareness, my own awareness generally about the sheer power that these organizations are accumulating through participation of individuals and organizations like my own has grown, I've become increasingly uneasy about being yet another content provider for these beasts that I think now pose an existential threat to justice and the environment. They are, as we all know, now developing AI capabilities with the big data that we generate for them that will yield them godlike powers. And those powers are institutionally held in the hands of a very, very small number of people. And even though, of course, we participate in them because they're providing goods and services that we want, and every act of participation is voluntary and consensual, nevertheless, they will use that power, of course, to service us users, but ultimately, they are answerable to their shareholders. We all know the 67 richest people in the world own already more than the bottom half of the entire human population. And that is inherently dangerous. Indeed, I think that it has become such an urgent issue that no matter how unlikely it is that we can build an alternative, institutionally structured alternative that guarantees that these powers will be used in the interests of all and in the interests of planet, even though taking on these mega powerful godlike beasts it's an almost invincible edifice that you're trying to take on. It is nevertheless so important that we must actually try to do that and to build an alternative system that develops these AI capabilities, these incredible... I do not repudiate the founders of Airbnb, Facebook, and Google. I believe in their purpose. I believe that they have come up with the most incredible tools that humanity has come up with in hundreds and hundreds, if not all history. You know, as the CEO of Google said at Davos this year, AI is going to be bigger than electricity in terms of a transformation in human power. No, it's going to be bigger than fire. And I believe that, and hats off to them.
So, Tristan, I was at Davos this year, and one thing
Rantover.
that was
Davos?
really surprising was this it's sort of like underground burgeoning of blockchain technology and crypto actually inhabiting Davos. I mean, you're talking about these platforms. We need a platform of trust, of supply chain, of consensus. Are you looking at any technologies like this for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, I'm a complete novice, as you can probably tell. But I have friends who are not. And indeed, I was staying in an apartment with my dear friend Pierre Mancini, who is one of the co-founders of Democracy Earth. And this is an example. Indeed, it is Democracy Earth and people like Pierre and her husband Santi Siri who probably give me more hope in the potential for a revolutionary and just future than anything else. I don't have a lot of hope. I think 99% chance of total failure to save. No, I mean, and I'm not trying to be.
We have to get that number.
No. Believe me, the high number is a good thing. I'll just take a little divergence to justify pessimism. Firstly, the data is on my side. If you look at the environment, mass species extinction event isn't a future catastrophe. It's happening right now. We participate in it every day. All of the environmental parameters are not just going, but are still accelerating in the wrong direction. I've been campaigning on this since I was a little child, and we are still accelerating further away from the goal. The likelihood of stopping this before most species on Earth are extinct and before a large number of people have gone through really terrible suffering and probably death is very, very small if you look at the trajectories. If we had a 99% chance of success, which lovely rosy-tinted optimists want us to believe because it helps them cope with despair apart from anything else, if we had a high percentage of chance of success, we can all sit back and some dude like Tristram is going to sort the problem out. If we have a 50% chance, maybe some of us are going to start sitting up and thinking, shit, do we have to do something about this? If we have a 1% chance, that means that we all have to, right now, jump up, wake up the giant that sleeps on the floor. The giant is us, the global citizenry, and say, dude, wake up. We've got to take this beast on. Or I'll tell you what, there's a great party down the beach, okay? Everyone in that party is having a great time. It's for justice, saving the planet. We're drinking toast ale. We're having a better party than the people destroying it. Come on. And that's how we're going to wake the giant up. Okay. And it's that small percentage chance that makes it an imperative.
Thanks, Tristan. How are we going for time? A few minutes, because I do want to...
shut up then.
I really want to ask Joanna, in terms of our industry, what is our responsibility? What are the opportunities for collaboration, for partnership, to help make change, to help have an impact?
Yeah, I mean, look, Tristram talked about waking the giant, and I think that this is what this is about. I felt that it was kind of it was a must. There was no deliberation we kicked off an event with Ashoka in December of 2017, and the feedback that we got from our clients, we had government, we had education, and we had clients attend this event. And we had Ashoka fellows speak, and we had, the likes of Google and Microsoft speak. And the feedback from our clients after the event was, how do we work with these change makers? What can we do to tap, the passion, the innovation, the kind of ideologies that these types of social entrepreneurs are pushing. And at that point, it just seemed to me like, we have to form a partnership with Ashoka. So I mean that's it's one small part, but I think we're going to kick this partnership off in Asia Pacific with Ashoka on a number of dimensions. The first is, how do we actually engage more executives? Going back to the change-making organizations and the influential business leaders, we have access to, again, an unbelievable client base in Asia. How do we engage these businesses? How do we help them be part of this conversation? How do we give them access to what the fellows are doing? So that's one part of it. And the second part of it is for the fellows themselves. I mean, again, we are a marketing and communications company, and we can help these Ashoka fellows really actually be their best in the digital ecosystem, and so we will be doing that as well. And that's really important, again, going back to our employee base. because it's, in our own employee survey, we're very weak in terms of our employees' perception of is the work that they're doing having an impact on the world around them. Our employees really want to feel a connection to something bigger, and this gives them a means to do that.
Thanks, Joanna. Arnaud, do you have anything to add before we close?
Yeah, the word that comes to my mind is really that I think that we need to shift from a world of serving people or producing and serving to a world of empowering, and unleashing the full potential of everyone. The moment you do that, and I think that the brands who will get that, the companies that will get it, and this is probably what we were maybe expecting from those giants, and that maybe is not happening. But the moment you can really empower and give the freedom to people to act and to do things, then I think that's a huge business case for everyone. So I would really encourage, most brands to really think in terms of, I'm not just selling something. How can I really empower through my products and my raison d'être the people I'm working with?